My name is Josh Jeffrey. I'm the managing director of Fourth Wave. Today, we're going to talk about operationalizing the unknown, why frameworks aren't working and the discipline that does. So let's get into the numbers a little bit here. So I know most of you have done the reading. McKinsey is around the rewiring of your organization. MIT's 95% of all pilots are failing. PwC releasing a great paper earlier this year. You know what the prescription is. Redesign the workflows, build the foundations, partner well, deploy broadly. However, that doesn't really meet the needs, and that doesn't really meet the numbers. So one thing that PwC did find was that 74% of all AI's economic value is going to just 20% of the firms that are out there. They determine these as AI leaders. These are the people that are driving 7.2 times the gains of the average company. That's a lot. So how are they doing it? I'm going to give you a secret. So here's the one-page AI strategy. This is it. This is all you need to do. You need to redesign your workflows around AI. You need to fix your data foundation. You need to partner with capable vendors. You need to upskill the workforce. You need to have CEO sponsorship and governance. You need to build well-governed, responsible AI frameworks. And you need to deploy broadly, not in pilots. You need to get it everywhere. So if we know this, and we know all these hows, and we know what's supposed to be done, why are only 20% of these organizations actually capturing real value? What I want to do is I want to run you through where our organizations truly are and what we're truly doing. So here is a Wordly framework. There are different areas of leadership, rules and constraints, people and mindset, all those different things. And then down here below is product and organization. So if you look, AI is really in the band of Genesis novel into custom built right now as a technology. That's where it lies. Our organizations are also there, surprisingly. However, we keep pursuing solutions that fall into the commodity and maximizing areas of our product and organization. And this is a fundamental mismatch in how we're approaching these opportunities and these problems. Before we get too deep, I want to talk about what AI actually does. There is a lot of conversation about AI and generative AI, and AI will solve your business and solve your business problems and an AI strategy. But we don't necessarily always describe the actual mechanisms that we're looking to exploit and capitalize on. So let's talk about identify. We use it to identify, we use it to label, we use it to predict in our forecasting, we use it to extract, pulling structured data from transcripts. And the big one that we haven't had for a very long time that is relatively new over the last few years is the generate. And that's what a lot of people are talking about when they talk about AI. They're talking about how can we leverage these tools to generate new ideas, new code, new drafts, new documents, new support in all those different ways. And it's less about, we got away from a lot of the boring, harder work on the machine learning side of identity, predict, organize, recommend, and extract. But they all come together and they all work together. And that's where the real magic can happen. So let's talk about operationalizing AI versus capitalizing on AI. We hear about all these different tools and we hear about how we are bringing them into our organizations. But the split between the 20% and the long tail isn't good at AI versus bad at AI. It's doing things with AI that are different than doing things with AI that are faster. Operationalization is necessary and it's real. And it's also competed away. Capitalization changes what you sell. Most of what's sold as transformation is the left, priced as what's on the right, including by people who look like me. So what I want to provide you a bit is different tools that you can use to identify when you're actually operationalizing and when you're actually capitalizing. So the capitalization test. So when a competitor copies a capability of yours, what's left? Ask yourself that question. Do you have something left? Is it something that is durable now? Is it something that is unique? Or is it something that if they copy that capability, it's now just a commodity within the marketplace? So here's a couple examples of where you can go with your capitalization questions. Is it changing a process? Is it redesigning and rebuilding a workflow, bringing the technology and AI into it? Is it using proprietary data that's tied to an action? We talk about data governance. We talk about data readiness. We say that AI needs clean data. We say that AI needs to support us, and it can only support us when we have the right data. Are you capturing the right data? Is that data proprietary? Is it hard to capture? Is it something that you can actually make actionable decisions off of? The distribution platform scale. Are you able to distribute past the point that your competitors can? One example is Walmart. Walmart released Sparky a few years ago, and what it's helped them do is really grow their business around the distribution of those tools to all of their customers. It's increased their lifetime value for those customers. It's increased their cart sizes. It's done a lot of those different things that you would expect from a durable distributed advantage. And then regulatory compliance step. Is this something that is protected and hard to do? You look at CMMC in government contracting and security. You look at PCI compliance. You look at legal. These are all very highly regulated, very high risk involvement of these tools that if you get them right, it's hard to replicate and it's hard to commoditize in a rapid way. So if you got nothing left, or you only have a few months lead based off of that copied capability, it's operationalization. And you need to look at it in that way and fund it in that way. I'm not saying that operation I was gonna do it. I was gonna mess it up at least once. Operationalization is bad. No, it's absolutely not. It's necessary. We go back to what that one-page AI strategy is. That's all operating out your internal capabilities to be able to make your organization better. But what it doesn't create is that durable advantage for your organization. And part of that operationalization is that the tech is the cheapest part of the system. The models and integration, we seem to have spent a whole lot of money, and you can see this in the news just time and time again. You're looking at Uber with their token costs. You're looking at Microsoft canceling subscriptions to Claude. You're looking at all these different things that are popping up in the news recently that people are putting a lot of their budgets towards. The problem is that the tools aren't really the big problem. It's really what's that context? What's that workflow? What's the human judgment and the organizational development of your organization to help grow the learning capability and the ability to experiment in your organizations? Those are the tough ones. They're hard. They're long tail. They don't have immediate ROI, but they build the durable capability that you need within your organization. The next tool I'll talk about is articulating the standard before you automate, right? This is one that you hear I've heard it for years and years and years in process improvement and automation projects I've been on and from leaders that I admire. And it's, if no one can write down what done is, it isn't ready for AI. If you can't articulate that process and how that goes through the process and it's not a repeatable process, then it's not ready for AI. Now you can use AI to help support you in ironing out that process and developing that process in a better way, but it's not ready to automate quite yet. And what happens is that we have the instinct to adopt a model or create a pilot or bring something to bear, and it doesn't work. And so then we say, our AI is mediocre. This isn't working for us. We need to toss it and get a better model. The underlying problems is that you really didn't have a good process in the first place, and you didn't have a good understanding of where the tools might work for you to fit into that. So if you don't have a good process, then don't try to automate it. AI is really, really great at amplifying whatever it touches. If that's ambiguity, it'll amplify ambiguity. If that's organized, structured, high performance operations, it'll amplify organized, structured, high performance operations. When it's done well, it works really well. So I like to say this: AI will do what you did yesterday. AI can't do what you'll do tomorrow. What this really means is that when we talk about what AI brings to our organizations, and we go back to those 6 topics that I talked about before with the identify and predict and recommend, that's all based off of data and information that we have provided these models. We have trained these models on. We have encoded in a way that these models are able to really drive a better understanding, a faster and more informed decision-making process than we had before. That's what we get. What it can't do is it can't do what you'll do tomorrow. It does not have a firm grasp or context or the ability to understand what we as business leaders are going through in our day-to-day, our week-to-week, our month-to-month, the market dynamics, the personal dynamics, the customer dynamics that we experience, the decisions and the choices that we make that sometimes may be irrational in that particular instance, but may then realize outsized gains in the future. So what we need to make sure to understand is that when we bring these tools into our workflows, when we bring these tools into our organizations, and we experiment with these tools and we apply these tools in the ways that make sense for our organization, that they're not oracles. They're not going to tell you the future. And it's a folly to rely on these tools to tell you the future. They don't have that context and they don't understand that. There are limitations to these tools, and that's one thing that we need to understand. A big part of that understanding is understanding where that fits with who we are as humans and who we are within our organizations. So that leads to tool number 3. So if we remove this role, where does the sensing go? Do we have the capability to reach out to what I was talking about before, the market, the unknown, be able to touch and be able to sense and be able to organize our thoughts around the sensing and the probing that we need to do with the unknown for us to understand the circumstances that we're in? Do we have that capability? And what happens is when you have a technology like AI that is rapidly evolving and rapidly growing in use, and some companies are allowing it to displace employees and displace that sensing layer and that learning capability layer within those institutions, you get a bill due eventually. It's really interesting. We've seen at least, I can think of at least a half a dozen different organizations that went the whole hog into bringing in agentic AI and AI support and all these other different things without a clear path and clear understanding of what it actually could do. And it displaced a lot of their workers. Recently, there was Jack Dorsey and his company. They let go 40% of their workforce, which is pretty crazy. So that's a significant number of people that are getting let go just for a technology. What that does to your organization is that you don't have the level of judgment that you used to have. You don't have the ability to process the information in the way that you had before. The tribal knowledge, the tacit knowledge that you hold in your organization melts away and erodes and becomes brittle. You don't know what to capture anymore. You have models that were based off of a different world and a different environment that's been encoded in that way. Are we getting better at developing new models with world models and all these other different things? Sure. that technology is not in a productive, capable way that has truly replaced the human element of what business is. So judgment takes a while. Judgment takes years to develop. It's experiences, it's culture, it's wisdom, it's stakes and risk, and being able to assume those different things that an AI model can't do. And as we look at that, we need to understand that we have a obligation to our organizations to make sure that we're bringing in people to learn and to grow with our capabilities and with the value that we provide as our organizations. So going back to the tool, if we remove this role, where does that sensing go? This is a question for you to ask when you're looking at hiring and firing decisions. The question to ask when you're looking at how we determine which technologies to bring in, how those technologies augment our workforce instead of replace our workforce. This is an example of what I was talking about. So this is Klarna, and they ran green for 15 months. They decided to replace 700 human agents with chatbots and customer service implementations and things like that. And said they were good until they weren't, right? The quality quietly eroded. The customers made their presence known, but unfortunately, they weren't aware of the consequences of what those cuts would do to their organizations. So I read his volume, but that wasn't the signal that actually mattered. The signal was the customer quality and the actual responses that they got. This is a prime example of exactly that. Now, I've talked a lot about the hows and the tools and what you can do. But what I want to really get at is that there is a significant mindset that we need to shift within our organizations, and we need to practice those skills. The ability to actually experiment and provide agency to those that are experimenting, and to be able to generate better informed bets and having a different way of approaching the world in business than we've had before. There's a lot of pressures in what we do in business around the stakeholder requirements, our shareholders who want high returns as fast as possible, our customers who want it now. All those pressures impact how we see the world and how we approach our businesses. And the last thing that I'm going to leave you with here is, are we the kind of organization that can figure things out under genuine uncertainty without bankrupting ourselves on the wrong bets? That's the final question. And if you can answer that question, I'd love to hear what that answer is. Because if you're not that, and you're attempting to bring these tools to the world and bring these tools within your organization, and you're focused on optimization and efficiency over experimentation and understanding, and focused on a heavy operationalization lean versus a capitalization desire, you won't be in that 20%. You won't be that AI leader. You just have to be a better experimenter, a better organization, and a stronger leader.
Thank you, Josh. Where would you say companies need to start with this? I mean, you're talking about a different mindset in how to go about thinking about AI, is what I'm getting from it. I mean, if you're a CEO, a CIO, a COO, where do you start even adjusting your mindset?
I think it's getting a deeper level of understanding. A lot of what's out there right now, like we're all ridiculously busy as leaders. We're constantly in meetings, we're constantly looking at the numbers, we're constantly looking at how we can optimize and build new capabilities and grow our businesses and all those different things, right?
Hmm.
And you can't do it alone, right? There is a time for the external help to help you understand what this technology is and what this technology can do. So one key point in that PwC report that I was talking about before is they talked about sophistication. And I really liked how they structured the sophistication argument because sophistication comes from deep understanding. And deep understanding comes from experimentation, and experimentation takes time. So you really have to structure your thinking and rhythm around more experimentation, more probing of what this technology can do for your organization, more asking, the what ifs and the I wonders and all those different areas, and then provide that agency within your organization. This is a technology that requires a cultural shift in many organizations. And that is, like I said before, we're trying to solve a cultural shift with a technological solution, and that doesn't work. There was another recent study that stated that 44% of Gen Zers are actively sabotaging their AI initiatives within their organizations because they have a fear of being left out and fear of being abandoned, and without a strong cultural understanding and support and really mindset change within an organization to support the adoption of these tools and to support the power of these tools, you just don't have it. You're just not going to be as successful as you could be.
So what would you say to business leaders, CEOs, et cetera, who hear that and go, we are doing that. That's all we've been doing for the last 3 years is experimenting and trying to get our people to figure out how to incorporate this and wonder if and wonder how they could do something differently. Well, obviously it's not working, right? The results say so. 5 to 7%, I think, of companies are really capitalizing on the AI opportunities. What do you think is missing in those cases?
That's a great question. And I would say that they're doing all the motions and less of the actual capture of that. And when I say that is that I think when you approach it in well, we're doing experiments. Okay. Are you capturing the results of those experiments? Are you learning from those experiments? How are you changing what you're actually doing from those experiments? Because creating a pilot and bringing it into your organization, say, let's do a customer service bot, for instance, or a customer service agent, for instance.
Mhm.
So we have a customer service agent, right? And we decide that we're going to pilot this customer service agent. What are we looking for that customer service agent? Are we looking at, oh, well, how many customers did this agent serve? Are we
Mhm.
looking at the customer response quality with using this? Time to resolution, all those different areas, right? And if we have all that, that's great information. And that's all operational information, right?
Mhm.
And that's not, did this actually increase their cart size? Did this actually increase the competitive advantage that we have over our competitors? I guarantee your competitor also has a customer service agent that they're monitoring the exact same numbers as you are. So what's actually changing? So it's not just about the pilots and the experimentation and what you're actually doing with those things that help operationalization. It's really about what are you actually capitalizing on? Is this a durable advantage for you? Did you actually change the way that people were able to interact with your company? Did you create a new product? Did you create increased value that cannot be easily replicated? Those are all the important parts of what those experiments should be looking at and what you should be capturing when you're measuring those experiments.
So it sounds like just one of the mistakes that people are making is just not digging deep enough to ask the right questions.
Right. And that comes with understanding, right? When we talk about the sophistication of these tools, I recently worked with a client that they were really just on the surface level. They're using all the consumer products, Gemini and Claude Desktop and all these other different things. And so they're using AI and they're testing AI and they're doing all these things with AI. And so they feel like they're AI forward, but that is scratching just the surface of what these tools can do. They're not looking at multi-memory agentic systems or integrating multiple ML models with some type of data pipeline that they have. That's not what they're doing. They're looking at, oh, I can generate new stuff. I can create a report. I can create a slide deck. This is helpful. This is time saving. Does that actually push the needle?
Right.
And everything that's out there, all the reports say this, all of my experience says this, it doesn't actually push the needle. It's not truly impacting your business in the way that you want it to. And you're not truly getting the ROI that you thought you were going to get by implementing these tools.
And that's because why, very specifically?
Because it's not about the operationalization and it's not about the how and the what you're doing. It's about the why. And it's about the deeper understanding that leads to that sophistication, that leads to you being able to make better bets that can allow you to capitalize on these tools.
We've got a question from Brett.
Great. Thanks, David. And thanks, Josh. I appreciate the insights today. I'm just curious about the Klarna case, and I don't, you may or may not have any more insight on that, but I'm just wondering, what could or should they have done differently pre-deployment to prod that might have prevented them from that catastrophic outcome? And also, once it went to prod, what, could they have been monitoring better to see something coming and maybe adjust rather than have to pull the plug a year later?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I can't get too deep into the Klarna case. I wasn't there to experience the pain. The postmortems are out there and they're pretty enlightening. Where I feel that they didn't quite hit the mark on was one, they let go of 700 human agents who had multiple interactions with other humans, understood the problems that they were addressing in those customer service calls, and didn't necessarily have a good idea of what that actually meant for those customer resolution requirements in the first place. So that's my guess. My guess is they didn't have good requirements, number one, and go back to the process automation that I talked about before. If you don't understand your process, if you don't know your process, you don't know what done really looks like, you're not able to automate it. Number two, customer service is, depending on the customer service, it's a human solution requirement. If I have a problem with a product, I'm the person that bought that product, then I need to know that some way I'm going to get a resolution for that problem and that someone knows about it and someone cares because that's the value. Right? A human put whatever this is together, if it's a service, if it's a product, if it's anything like that, they decided that they wanted to provide that to the world. And they have the responsibility to support me when I purchase that because I'm offering them that value. And that needs there's a human connection there that needs to be recognized. The other piece of it is that they're measuring the wrong things and they didn't have a good understanding of what this would do for their market. We talked about it like what would they actually measure? Well, that would need to be determined by a better understanding of the actual human interactions that they had before. And that typically comes from a human that has the expertise to look at a process and say, nope, that's the wrong process. I'm sure you've been through a process improvement exercise or any type of digital transformation where you're process mapping everything and looking it over, and somebody's like, nope, that's not how it's done. It's actually done this way. Or, nope, we do a
Mhm.
workaround around this particular area, right? All those little things that get captured are what aren't necessarily always encoded when we release these different automations or these different agents. And that's an important thing to think about. If I don't know as a person what that agent or what that automation can or cannot do, I can't properly evaluate to see if it's doing the right thing. And I think that's a very important thing that we have to understand as organizations.
So Brendan asks, where do you stand on buy versus build, and how should companies go about reliably answering this question as AI needs grow and change?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Like I said before, and if you looked at the chart that I brought up, the evolution framework there, a lot of where organizations are is really in those early stages of Genesis novel and looking to custom build, right? And when I say custom build, I'm not saying custom build all these models and all these tools and completely redo Claude for your organization, though there are a lot of organizations that are now rethinking how they're approaching sovereign AI and how they can leverage these tools within their organizations without having to rely on a vendor. But we don't know what we don't know. And if we don't have a good understanding of what the technology can do and how deep it can go and where we're at as an organization around our organizational development and our technology journey and how it matches what our competitive advantages are, then it's very hard to answer the buy versus build. The other part of that is that on the buy side, many of these products are very new and or they're old products with AI bolted on them. They don't have long track records of reliability or stability. Some are just thin wrappers of Claude or ChatGPT or any of the other larger providers. All of those different things go into the understanding part of it. Like, do you understand what this is actually doing? Does this particular vendor actually have a moat around their product, or is something else going to come out next week that's the exact same thing? AI assisted coding has been here for a couple years now, and it's just gotten better and better and better and better and better, right? I can spin up a wrapper-based application within a weekend, get it in production within a couple weeks, and start marketing and selling it. That might not be the best solution for your organization. So again, it goes back to understanding the technology, understanding the environment, understanding that this is going to take, risk and ambiguity and making bets to really get it right for your organization.
Really appreciate the insights here in terms of how to think about mindset shifts in terms of how to think about the problem. And I hope it's going to be very valuable for people. I think that your white paper, our white paper, the fourth wave white paper is very insightful. It's a different way to think about the problem. And I hope people will read that and hopefully get a lot of value out of that. We've got Stephen who has a question.
Yeah, good stuff so far. I'm wondering how much does AI literacy play into this? What I'm seeing in a lot of organizations is even to have these conversations, there needs to be a baseline of common literacy because, everybody's watching YouTube and going to conferences and you never know what you're going to hear. What do you think that looks like to set a baseline of what does everybody need to understand before you can even have the conversation for that conversation to be useful? I find myself going in circles quite a bit, which is why I'm asking. Any thoughts there?
That's a great point. Yeah, there's the literacy point gets to the understanding point as well. Like we need a deeper understanding within our leadership and throughout our organizations of the technology in general, the application of the technology. There's such a heavy focus on generative AI, and rightfully so. But like you've experienced and I've experienced and everybody else has experienced it, there's a lot of hype behind it. And it's very hard for people to develop a true understanding and true baseline foundational level of literacy when the next tool is the discussion instead of the application of those tools. I don't know if you caught it before. I talked a little bit about in the presentation of what AI actually does. And there's 6 different mechanisms that I identified, and 5 of the 6 are not generative. Their identification, their extraction, their recommendation, all these different engines and these different models that we've had for AI has been around for 70 years, and we've just built upon it over and over and over again. The consumer side of it is new. The generative side is relatively new, but it's been around for quite some time. And I think just helping people understand the baseline of that and then giving them the opportunity. Literacy comes with skill development as well. Oh man, I've seen a few really, really bad workshops where it was just telling you what AI is. And that really doesn't get to the crux of the problem around literacy. You have to try these tools. You have to experience them. You have to get excited. You have to get disappointed. You have to develop the judgment, which I talked about before. It takes time. And we're all super busy and our capacity is maxed out. And we, as organizations, haven't done a good job of making the space for that. And that's one of the key points.
That's great, Josh. Do you have any follow-up questions or thoughts for Josh on that, Stephen?
No, I think that's a good point of it's kind of like riding the horse, right? You got to do it in order. And I think like a lot of L&D teams and such, I think that's where we run around in circles is we're going to set up this presentation for you, but people are
Hmm.
afraid to either give access to AI or it's YOLO. And they're having a hard time riding the line of just this is not like other technologies. You have to actually get on and use it.
Right. The best workshops that I've done, and I've provided multiple workshops, a couple hundred actually, is the ones where people get their hands dirty, right? Like I had one with a client earlier this year. We really got into this is an itch that needs to be scratched, right? And it was around they were using a spreadsheet to do communication back and forth with their clients on video editing and what they wanted within the video and what they didn't want in the video. So the end user was recording the timestamp, what they didn't like, and what needed to change all within a spreadsheet. And the user experience on that was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. And they knew that it was terrible. They just didn't have a tool to do that. And during one of our workshops, when I was showing different tools and providing time to play, they built you watch the video live, you can pause the video, you can write in the comments around it, and then you hit play and it keeps going. And that all sends it back to them so that it reduced the friction for that client to actually be able to provide that feedback, which in turn sped up the entire process for both the client and for that production team. So, like, that's one simple example of just learning the tools as you're building something useful for your organization and developing out that as a pilot on the fly, right? Now they can take that and really apply it in different aspects of their work and they can build on those ideas as long as you have the culture and the space to be able to do that.
And I think maybe that gets to the heart of one of the biggest root problems is that you're dealing with a lot of ignorance, right? And you're dealing with people who should know, right? In the sense of they're the people in the organization who have typically been leading in whatever technology, whatever is being implemented, whatever is being done, right? Whether it's the CIO or CTO or learning and development, right? How can you teach people how to do something, how to utilize something, how to implement something if you don't really know, right? I mean, you can teach theory, right? You can tell people what AI is, and you can tell them the difference between an agentic tool and an LLM and machine learning and everything else. But if you don't know what good looks like, if you don't know how to really get in there and solve a problem, would you agree that that's one of the root problems? And if so, what does the company do with that?
I like to say it starts at the top and it happens at the bottom, right? So if you have a lack of understanding in your executive team or the leadership that's responsible for this, even a lack of understanding around the vision and the culture necessary to truly leverage these tools in a stronger way, and that's up to the CEO, the COO, the CIO, any C, whatever O level, then you diminish the ability for people to actually execute against it. So if as a CEO, I don't provide a CIO a strong vision and a direction and the agency to innovate, then the CIO can't innovate, right? CIOs are innovators. They absolutely are. They look at the technology, they see how they can apply it within the organization to match the vision, and they drive forward. If they don't have that vision and they don't have the understanding and they aren't able to advise the CEO to help develop that CEO's understanding, then you end up in a vicious cycle of, hey, we want AI and we want it now by the board. CEO parrots that with a couple of articles that they read. The CIO is like, well, what can we stop doing so that we can do this? Because our team is currently, in the middle of a digital transformation we started 2 years ago. And we're fighting all these other requirements because we just did an acquisition of this other company that has a completely different ERP. Like, where do you want us to put AI on the priority list? And it conflicts. That's business. That's how that works. You have to be able to understand what's going on and understand the priorities and understand the vision and realize that you're going to have to make some bets and you're going to have to take some risk. And the best way to do that is to do it in a disciplined way, in a way that you're actually learning and growing from those bets. to determine, what the next bet might be.
And I think Stephen may have a follow-up on that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It just seems like the previous technologies are kind of technologies inflicted on other people to a certain degree.
Yeah.
It's kind of the Empire Strikes Back. On the other side of it, you have this grassroots effort and people being able to design and implement automations that have never had access to the tools or knowledge to do it. It's democratized IT or technology in general in such a way that I feel this conflict between the CIO and CTO, because CTO is pushing growth advancement and CIO is like, well, we have to govern this thing, when the actual people are able to just kind of watch these guys and then just kind of do their own thing. And there's kind of this triad going on of how to implement something when actually it's grassroots, ground up, like you're saying, like you're giving is you build it and you prototype it, you get this thing out. That really hasn't happened before. You've not seen legal come up with their own technology and say this is what we need to do. And so there's this conflict of whose job is it, because the CIO and CTO, the CIO has never run legal, and the only people who know that are legal, and they need
Yeah.
to build it, but it cuts IT out of the loops because of the governance. So I see a lot of everybody trying to vie for this control and power. When we shut this down, it's hard to find that right balance.
So the one thing that's really interesting, I wrote it in the paper, the one thing that's really interesting about the organizations that are doing well with AI, it's not that they're building the literacy programs and have great governance and experimenting and doing all these things that every single strategy says that you need to do. It's absolutely correct. It's that they have a different culture. And like I wanted to go back to what you're talking about is that we haven't seen organizations that have developed technology at this, it's usually a top-down approach instead of a bottom-up approach. And I'd push back on that a little bit. If you look at a lot of organizations that are highly innovative, that have really built a culture around that experimentation and that innovation, that have allowed their employees and their members to be inventive in how they approach the problems and the unique problems that happen within their work, you see a completely different level of adoption and implementation and agility and adaptability of that organization. And that's really what we're talking about here. We've built a lot of organizations around I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Cynefin framework, around complicated problems. Yes, they got a lot of steps. There's a lot to do. You do need experts to solve these problems, but there's a known solution, and we can get to that known solution. So building an engine, for instance, you need to know torques, you need to know where things go, you need to know all these different things, right, to be able to build that engine. But you end up with an engine, and the engine runs. That's not where this technology currently is. We're in a much more emergent environment and condition that these tools are causing within our organizations. It's much more complex, which requires that inventiveness. It requires that the ability to take risks, the ability to sit with ambiguity, all things that we have resisted within our organizations and tried to resolve and solve for years and years and years and years and years. That's industry, right? That is what we want to do. We want to get to a repeatable process that is high performing and create operations around that. We don't have repeatable processes around this stuff yet. And so we need to have that culture and that understanding within the organization and the agency within the organizations to develop those skills that we're sorely lacking in most organizations.
All right, very good. I'm going to come to Brett for the last question.
Yeah, and maybe this is a good one to wrap on. So, I've been in cybersecurity and IT for 25 years, and, I've been focused on data and automation. Those are essential tools. And frankly, I've loved playing with those tools for all that time. And so, my approach to AI so far, I use it daily, right? I've got pro subscriptions on all the pro or max subscriptions on the things, but I often find myself in that same thing of like, I'm trying to be better, stronger, faster at just the same things that we were doing yesterday. And I just wonder, oh, maybe we are asking the wrong questions because there's a lot more that's possible than me just being better, stronger, and faster at automation. And I just wonder if we take the approach you've described here and deploy AI thoughtfully, deliberately, then what kind of transformation do you see as actually possible that goes beyond kind of the practical, if you will?
you can't answer the possible, right? Because we don't know what's possible, and we don't know what's possible until we find what's possible. It's how do we get to the point where we are back to imagination and play and creating organizations that are able to leverage those different feelings and very human things that we do, right? I heard Satya Nadella and Reid Hoffman, they were on a panel conversation. I read the full transcript a couple times, actually. It was pretty good. What Satya was saying was that companies need to refound themselves. And how I take that is if you were to start your business today and looking at your unique value prop, you can do, business model canvas, whatever you want to do to kind of figure out who you are as a business. But if you had your unique value prop first, is that still, a unfair advantage within the marketplace, or has that been commoditized away using this technology? And second, how would you build for it today versus don't worry about anything else, completely wipe your memory of everything that all the problems and the processes and systems that you've built before. How would you build it today, right? And imagine and play with the idea and see where that might go, because it might be a completely different structure for your organization. This is one that we talked about in the presentation. Let's replace everybody with agents. Instead of doing that, like what does that actually mean? And start understanding like what that looks like. Play with it, build a simulation with a bunch of agents for your organization and play, right? I think that helps open us up. We're not skilled at it anymore. We're not skilled at imagining new things and designing new things. We've had that really kind of beaten out of us through the traditional consulting engagements around MECE and things like that. Our short-term shareholder value requirements for publicly traded organizations and just our passion for those repeatable processes and Lean Six Sigma and all those other different things that we've focused on, the optimizing and efficiency and productivity. Those all come with these tools. We need to understand the tools better and really identify what's next and what's new. And let's run into possible, with a full head of steam, right? And just like hitting a brick wall. So that's what I got.
Josh, I love how it comes back to really what is our mission here at Fourth Wave, which is to elevate humanity, elevate humans, right? And I think this is a huge part of what companies are getting wrong is they're trying to elevate technology, elevate AI. And really, they ought to be looking to elevate humans, right? Freeing humans up from the drudgery of work they don't even want to do so that they can be freed up to be creative and to think deeply, think broadly into areas that they haven't even thought of before. What's possible? Thinking about, if I was in this position, if I was the CIO of this organization, if I was the CEO of this organization, if I was the CMO of this organization and everything was possible, what would I do? What would I build? What new products would I build? What new channels would I build? What new everything,
Yep.
right? And that's the possibility. And we're so, as humans, like you said, like we've been so programmed, for lack of better words, by the system, by business to, you get in your box, you get in your cubicle, these are your tasks, these are things you do, and you just churn out the work, right? Well, we don't have to do that anymore. We can have machines do that for us and in ways that elevate us. That's the trick and the maybe missing component. I think that what I hear from a lot of CEOs and boards who are just trying to have machines do that human work, but they're missing that component of freeing up the human mind and capitalizing on that human mind. If anything, to me, that's the most important thing that we ought to be capitalizing on. There's nothing greater than that we have created. And to me, I mean, we'll see what we do with AGI, but I think to me, there will be nothing greater that we will invent greater than the human mind. So how do we free it up in order to capitalize on it, not just from a external, capitalist kind of, exploitative perspective, but for our own selves? How do we as workers, as humans, as people who can create and really want to work and want to create and want to build? How do we capitalize on the technology for our own sakes? That's what I'm thinking about.
Yep. Very good points.
Thank you so much, Josh. I really appreciate your insights today. Thank you for our attendees. Thank you for the really, really great questions that we had. At Fourth Wave, we help companies to figure all this out, how to think about AI at the executive level, to align on that, to think deeply about what's possible with employees at large, getting people aligned and upskilled and capable of reimagining in their work what they do and how they could, like I said, capitalize on for their own sakes, for their own careers, for their own development, how to incorporate this technology and many more things, how to govern it, how to secure it, on and on and on. So thank you, everybody, for attending. Josh, thank you for leading this. And Fourth Wave out. Appreciate
Thanks,
you.
everybody.